Alright guys, Hutchcraft back again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far, and thankfully over the past few days we actually have some scrims getting into play. They may not be great, but at least the pros are able to practice. The coaches have put together their power ranking list and what they've seen behind the scenes in scrims over the past several weeks in terms of which teams are the best to the worst at the present time. Some surprises on here for sure. Clearly a worse team, clearly a best team you could argue as well, going into the first event of the season. Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Quick update here from Scump as we looked at the other day. The fact that sweatband in video got to 10 million views, like absolute crazy stuff. Also wanted to mention, as Albini pointed out to me here, that I hadn't really been keeping track of this, but the Scump and Crimsix kind of documentary that I'm sure a lot of you guys have watched on the channel at this point has still been absolutely frying in the algorithm. I don't know how, to be honest, but I mean, yeah, I guess it ticks all the boxes, right? Long video, good watch time, good thumbnail, good title, like, and yeah, that got to 1 million views just the other day, so wanted to thank you guys for that one as well. Crazy stuff, good milestone for the channel to have a video at 1 million views. I knew it would get there eventually, but yeah, I'm surprised it got there quite so quickly maybe. I don't know, I just thought pretty cool stuff. So yeah, thanks to all those who have supported the channel over the last several years. It's really been a great journey with you all, and we're expanding into new horizons as well with some of the other channels that some of you guys watch, some of you guys don't, and that's absolutely fine. Only follow if you're interested, of course. Let's talk about some spice in the challenger scene, as Mork says, mind blown, myself, Chino, and Noisy are looking for one. So Morks, Cheen, Noisy were teaming with Wardy, who is currently the Subliner's substitute. So interesting situation really, because if you're the Subliner's sub, you would think that that team kind of becomes a pseudo Subliner's Academy roster, but clearly Wardy has different ideas. Now, he was potentially going to be a target for London. We thought that, I thought that was a no-brainer to get Wardy instead of Afro for that London team. They either didn't get him, or he went to join, New York Subliner's bench of his own volition, thinking that he's going to get a spot at some point in the starting team, which he may well do. Now, Fire says people always reveal their true selves. Now, I believe Fire is now going to be teaming with Wardy, so I think that it's going to be Wardy, Mohawk, Fire, plus one. I forget exactly the fourth on the team, but I believe that, Wardy's going to join Mohawk's team alongside Fire and co. And speaking of Fire, Mork says this, at Wardy, thanks for the fire, G. So basically saying, screw you, thanks for leaving, you've really lit a fire under me to just absolutely take you down when the Challenger Cup actually begins. This is just vintage Challenger stuff. And as Wardy says, bro, I don't care about your fire, what's this tweet gonna do? Just this is just hilarious, to be honest. The ratio is pretty big here, but I mean, pretty funny stuff, right? I really don't know how this relationship broke down, but yeah, Wardy's now having a go at Morks. Morks, I'm sure, and that team wants to really get revenge on Wardy when they play each other, which they probably will at some point or another. And Wardy, I suppose, has decided to deliberately leave and kind of, pursue these newer horizons elsewhere, and even Draza in the reply. So yeah, this Wardy kid, man, there's some entertainment going around this guy for sure. He's got that kind of character and personality that I think he will get a shot in the league at some point relatively soon. Whether it's this season, I don't know, because look, we've seen great talents, the likes of even Sib, right, sit out an entire season on the bench of Atlanta FaZe because they were Atlanta FaZe in Cold War. There was nothing they could do. Then he got picked up to Seattle last year, won an event at Major 3. So we'll see if Wardy gets a chance. Generally an SMG player, right, for the Subliners, and you'd think that really, are they going to replace Kismet on that team given such a glue that he was last season? Maybe, maybe not. Could Hydra, though, potentially become a flex and Priester gets replaced for Wardy in terms of a Wardy and Kismet SMG duo? I don't know about that one either, so I guess stay tuned for that. And it's the same story with Beans over at Boston. Both of these players I think will get a chance, but where does Beans come in for? Because he's an AR player, he'd be replacing either Zinni or Awakening, but it's do you replace Awakening or Methods? It's kind of tough to say what the plan is there, because if you replace Methods, you lose a big character and asset and personality and voice and vocal leader on the team, but then you replace Awakening, it's why did you sign him in the first place? So I don't know, big questions to answer this season coming out of the Challenger side. And this is pretty funny because Chino saw this and found out about it. I think maybe Crone said what one roster was going to be, potentially with that Chino team, and then he was informed he pre-fired a Challenger roster change, so next time we'll wait 24 hours so we know that it's sticking, right? So that's the thing, I'm pretty sure they formed that roster, and then very quickly it exploded. So, classic Challenger stuff. Crone tweeted it, and within a few seconds of him tweeting that roster existed, the roster had now blown up and they'd gone a different way as well. Let's talk about some scrims then, because Los Angeles Guerrillas, they were a key talking point coming into this season. Will they actually be any good? That's a big question mark. Arstees is talking about the M4 here, how easy it was to use, and he talks about the Scar and the AK as well, some other weapons that are good in this game, and also kind of talks to Joe Deceives here, because Joe, of course, part of the Los Angeles Guerrillas Academy. Arstees on the main LAG team, and apparently he was having a pretty good time up against LAG. So one of the positives against having an academy is that you get to scrim the academy roster, play them in search and destroy, and you don't get to reveal any strats and stuff against other teams. But still, still, how have they been doing in their actual practice? Last night, EasyMac went through and has kind of been talking to all the coaches of all the teams over the past few days and has got them to vote where the other teams lie. So the way this works is you ask the coaching staffs of each teams, they come up with the rankings 1 to 11, not including themselves, and the team that they give first in their rankings gets 11 points, so the maximum I believe will be 121 for 11 votes of first place for 11 points each, because you can't vote for themselves, and the worst possible score is 11 because 11 teams gave you 1 point for being last, basically. So that's how this works, and this has been used to a pretty good effect the last couple of seasons. It's always interesting to see this because this is kind of anonymous, and the coaches just give their perspective on what they see from teams behind the scenes, not necessarily where people think they should be. So this is the article here, and this is kind of the way it's done. We'll have a look at the power rankings here in a second. So Thieves are first, and this to me is pretty impressive. And the points totals here is important. We'll see the points totals crucially in a second, because it's not just the rankings, but it's how close many of these teams are in the rankings. But Thieves at 112 points is pretty massive, because this means that out of 121 they could have got, they got 112, which means that practically everyone put them first or second, or right at the top, which is pretty impressive from Thieves, because I thought they'd be good this season. I think I even predicted on one of the podcasts that they're going to go back-to-back and win champs again, but I didn't expect them to be quite the number one straight out of the gate, right? Yes, they're the world champions, deserve a lot of respect for that, but I thought, okay, going into a new title, they took a long time to get last year's title right. I thought, okay, they might regress a little bit and then come through. By the time it gets to Major 2, 3, they'll really be mixing it up for event wins. I wasn't necessarily sure they'd be there right at the start, but apparently they're already the best team in the game. FaZe are second, and to me, FaZe is an interesting one because the coaches always give a lot of credit to FaZe. Like, even if they're not doing that well in scrims, I'm sure that FaZe get the benefit of the doubt of certain coaches because they're FaZe, they know what they're doing. So I feel like FaZe are always not exactly artificially inflated, but just because FaZe have been demolishing everyone in scrims the last few years, even if they're not demolishing everyone now, the coaches will still give them the benefit of the doubt because they know what FaZe have been absolutely demolishing them for the last few years. So look, I think we saw FaZe not having such a bit of a rocky start, but then I think it's come back a little bit to them over the last couple of weeks. So Thieves at FaZe, that is the S tier, and then it goes down to the rest of the team. So I'll look at it from this perspective because it's easier to see here. So these are the rankings on the right hand side. These are the amount of points these teams accrues. So Thieves and FaZe quite clearly number 1, number 2. They are by far and away, according to the coaches, the two best teams behind the scenes right now. Then you've got an absolutely stacked midfield. So in the 70 points, you've got Toronto, Minnesota, bang on the same numbers, which is pretty interesting, right? Because going into the season, I would have said that Toronto, Minnesota are so tight to call in terms of how good these teams are. And in terms of where the coaches voted for them, when you add up the numbers, they get to exactly the same number. Then we've got Vegas in 5th. So this is really cool, honestly, to see this, because going into the season, I think we thought, and I certainly thought, that it would be probably, London, Florida, and then Vegas is kind of I thought Vegas would be about the 10th best team, something like that. Turns out they're 5th as it stands, and they're right in the mix of being very competitive with all these other teams around them. So that's really cool stuff. They're basically an A-tier team that the coaches feel like has potential to even win it. Now, I do think the meta favors them very nicely right now, having Clay and Temp, is definitely a more AR-focused team than TJ and Prolute as the SMGs. And that's why probably in this M4 dominant meta that they're actually having a pretty good time, all things considered, right? And yes, if it did become a more SMG-focused meta, I do think they would struggle more if they had to put Temp on a flex and they had to really rely on the performance of Prolute and TJ. Not sure it would go so well. But as it is now, they're looking good. So they are the 5th best team. Then you've got Surge in 6th, and then Optic 7th. This, of course, is going to raise a lot of eyebrows and kind of, wow, Optic 7th? I think people expect them to be an S-tier team right up there with Thieves and FaZe. But they are, not at the top of the kind of A-tier as it stands. They're actually at the bottom of it. But of course, the numbers are so close here. A couple of changes in people's rankings, and Optic are, probably 4th or 3rd or whatever, right? So a couple of small tweaks. So really, it's all pretty similar in terms of what people expect here. But still interesting to note, right? Because if Optic are indeed, as it stands, the 7th best team behind all these other ones, then, what does that even mean for the World Championship, let's say? Because if Vegas are good enough to get some good results at the start of the season and get some good points on the board, then, you've got other teams that should come back in the latter half of the season, your Bostons, your New York, your Gorillas, and they might, fight their way back through, and all of a sudden, champs qualification is kind of in question. So it's interesting to look at this, right? Because we've got apparently two kind of S-tier teams that are above the rest. We've got a stacked A-tier, then we've got a B-tier of Subliners and Breach. And again, it's kind of funny to see this because I think many expected, New York and Breach. To me, in terms of figuring out who was the 8th best team, I couldn't call between New York and Boston to kind of who I would put in as the 8th and 9th team, because that's how I would have had it kind of in a list like this, but with Gorillas instead of Vegas, and probably a few different orders. But that was pretty much my top 8 team, and then I couldn't decide between Subliners and Breach, and it turns out the coaches can't decide either. 1 point between them. And then you get down to the trash tiers, basically. You get Florida in 10th, Gorillas, though, in 11th. Like, this is not a good sign. They are way off the pace here in terms of being a kind of A-tier competitive team. The coaches obviously don't think they're very good at all. On average, they got 3 points, right? So 11 coaches voted. They got 3 points on average per coach. That means that on average, they were put in 10th place, I suppose, which is not particularly good either. Mutineers on average put slightly higher than that. And then you've got right at the bottom, we got the London Royal Ravens, maybe. So this is the team clearly that Dashi was saying the other day was not particularly good. And as I say, the lowest amount of points you can possibly score here is 11, and they've managed to score 13. So only 2 coaches out of 11 coaches put them at 11th, and all the other coaches put them at 12. So yeah, not a good sign for Ravens. As I say, it's kind of interesting because yes, their SMG duo also isn't like fantastic, but I thought that maybe Zero and Paul as an AR could at least, you know, in this meta be a pretty good factor, but it doesn't seem like so far that's the case at all. They're getting smoked. So what do you guys think about this tier list going into the season? This kind of makes a fair bit of sense to me, and also this is ordered, right, with Optic in 7th here, apparently behind all these other teams as it stands. So definitely a surprising one to me. I would have thought that, like, this seems about right in terms of the order to me, but I'm certainly surprised that Optic isn't slightly higher in the A tier, let's say, than they presently are. Now, as I say, the numbers are so close that it's kind of really difficult to call between many of these teams. And what does this mean for the competitiveness of the game? We saw the other day that kind of Octane was like, yeah, no one's really getting smoked apart from maybe one team, as Dashi says, but no one's like frying anyone either. So I think it's very closely contested here. But the coaches do seem to believe there is a category above. There is kind of a really competitive A tier of which any of these rosters could win an event. Then you've got the B tier slightly below with New York and Boston, a team that has the potential to make a top 4, but maybe isn't going to win anything. And then it just gets worse and worse from there with Los Angeles Guerrillas on this evidence also not looking good at all, right? So yeah, if LAG aren't looking good, I mean, you've got to really ask the questions as to what they're doing with their roster building, because, I mean, yeah, damn, they've made some questionable decisions. There's no doubt the last couple of seasons. But yeah, what do you guys think about this? Because the question is the game super random, right? Is Modern Warfare 2 incredibly random, tougher to predict whatever's going to happen this season, and therefore you just can't really tell who's going to have good results? And every match is just a coin flip, right? I'm sure that at some point this season, some pro is going to say coin flip league on Twitter, and we're going to talk about it again. But look, last season, we said that with Vanguard, FaZe came second the vast majority of events last season. So there was some consistency, and already the 2 teams that I expected to be topping the list really are, you know, once again at it again in the S tier. But the big surprises are Vegas, the 5th best team right now, Optic, the 7th best team, and then probably Los Angeles Guerrillas being all the way down here, I think is something of a surprise as well. These are all the rosters as well, if you guys aren't familiar with them, just to bring them up on screen for you guys to check out one last time. And just to finish out with this, I thought it was funny from Clayster here. Apparently they've been having a discussion within their team themselves. Don just said he would smoke TJ in a race. I need opinions on who's winning. Who do you guys reckon for this? Because I think it's pretty tough to call, actually. I voted for Don, but I really wasn't sure. I was going to vote for Tej, and then I changed my mind last minute. But yeah, most people think Tej, but maybe Don's going to win. I don't know. I want to see it at Major 1, that's for sure. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.
Moving.